I spent the first 20 years of my life growing up in Medford, Oregon, Southern Oregon. Spent a lot of time in the little town of Jacksonville and the valley of Applegate. Highway 238 rolls through Jacksonville and goes up to Rouge and Applegate. Applegate is an unincorporated community in Jackson County, Oregon. It is west of Medford on Route 238 and the Applegate River. The community was probably named for Lindsay Applegate, who along with his brothers Jesse and Charles explored the Applegate Valley while blazing the Applegate Trail. As young boys, we spent a lot of time riding our bicycles and hiking on the trails of the foothills around Jacksonville. Got into a lot of poison oak and spent a lot of miserable days trying to get rid of the stuff. The Applegate Valley is now known for its wineries and marijuana farms. Back in the 70s, there was neither of those. We mostly went out there for the Applegate River, where we'd swim in the river to cool off from miserable hot summer days. Lindsay Applegate was an American pioneer known for his participation in blazing the Applegate Trail, an alternative route of the Oregon Trail. The trail was blazed with his brothers and Charles and Jesse in 1846, though Charles was not a member of the party that blazed the section of the Applegate Trail from the Willamette Valley to the Humboldt River. According to an original manuscript written by Lindsay Applegate in 1877, the members of the expedition were Captain Levi Scott, John Scott, son of Levi, Henry Boygus, Lindsay Applegate, Jesse Applegate, Benjamin Birch, John Owens, John Jones, Robert Smith, Samuel Goodhue, Moses Black Harris, David Goff, Bennett Osborne, William Sportsman, and William Parker. Lindsay Applegate was born to Daniel and Rachel Applegate in Kentucky on September 18, 1808. The family moved to the Osage Valley, Missouri in 1820, where they farmed. In 1831, Lindsay married Elizabeth Miller, whose sister Melinda was married to Lindsay's older brother Charles, and they had 6 sons. He fought in the Black Hawk War against Native Americans in 1832. In 1843, Lindsay and Charles traveled with their younger brother Jesse to the Oregon country after they all sold their farms in Missouri, bought several hundred head of cattle, and set out at the behest of Jesse's good friend Robert Shortness. At that time, the Oregon Trail was still in its infancy, and the final 100 or so miles beyond the Wascopan Mission had to be traveled by boat through dangerous winds, rapids, and eddies on the Columbia River. Lindsay's 9-year-old son Warren died as Jesse's 10-year-old son Edward, who did not know how to swim, when their boat began to sink in the rapids. Because of the many fatalities on the river, they sought to find a different way to immigrate to Oregon. Lindsay and 14 other settlers established the South Immigrant Trail between Fort Hall in Idaho and the Willamette Valley in Oregon via northern Nevada and then through southern Oregon, where Ashland and Roseburg now lie. The intents of this route were to be safer than the Columbia River, encourage settlers to western Oregon, avoid the area controlled by the Hudson's Bay Company, and steer clear of the disputed British territory north of the Columbia, which most settlers expected would soon become the U.S.-British Columbia border. They traveled due south through the Willamette, Umpqua, and Rogue valleys. At the south end of the Rogue Valley, the site of present-day Ashland, they turned east and crossed the Cascade Range, following approximately present-day Route 66, and emerged near where Keno, Oregon now lies. They went around the south end of Klamath Lake and eventually to the future site of Winnemucca, Nevada. The party then split, leaving some to rest, while the remainder followed the Humboldt River northeast and along the California Trail to Fort Hall. The first immigrants to use the Applegate Trail did so in the fall of 1846 by following the Applegate Party on the return trip, a group of perhaps 150 families which were persuaded by Jesse. This park is called Cantrell Buckley, where I spent a lot of summers with family having barbecues, picnics, and swimming in the river. I recall many summers when my dad would drop us brothers off 5-10 miles upriver with inner tubes, and we would spend the day floating down the river. By the time we got to Cantrell Buckley, we were pretty hungry, tired, and pretty sunburnt. Now back to our story of the Applegate Trail. Upon their return, the combined party began to blaze a trail for wagons, though they were ill prepared for such an effort, having few tools and consisting of mostly weary immigrants. They also faced an early winter, one which set snowfall records and stranded the Donner Party in the Sierra Nevada a few hundred miles to the south. By the time they arrived in the Rogue Valley, winter had set in. Rain, snow, mud, swollen creeks, and rivers hampered passage. Low supplies, scarce game, dense brush and trees, and difficulty lighting warming fires slowed progress considerably, separating the immigrants over many miles. They were spared by relief parties from the Willamette Valley when news of their trouble traveled along the trail. The Applegates were blamed for the hardships the first wagon train faced when a war was waged between parties and nearly led to a duel between them and an Applegate supporter, James Nesmith. Remnants of the hostilities survive today among some descendants of those survivors. Though the Applegate Trail minimalized natural dangers, aggressive Indian warriors took the lives of at least 300 immigrants by 1862, even though the trail fell into general disuse by 1847.